so everybody knows. And our judges are going to introduce themselves, and they'll turn over the time for you to introduce yourself, and we'll get started. So go ahead, Judge.
Tim, you're muted.
Yeah. Hello. Welcome, California. It's nice to see you. I'm Tim Moore from the Center for the Study of the American Constitution at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. My colleagues are?
Good morning. I'm Rita McCannon. I'm an attorney in Huntsville, Alabama, and I'm really glad to be with you today.
Hi, I'm Jack Barlow. I'm a professor of politics at Juniata College in Pennsylvania.
And we've all met a couple months ago, but it's let's introduce ourselves again. You are?
Of course. Good morning. My name is Tom Lee, and we're Unit 2 from Amador Valley High School in Pleasanton, California, representing the Golden State of California. We'd like to take the time to thank all of you for listening to our testimony today.
Good morning. My name is Soraya Bonner.
And I'm Akash Raju. Once again, we'd like to thank you for listening to us today. We'd also like to thank our teacher and coach, Ms. Sklar, and our facilitator and timer, Mrs. Lindblom.
Thank you, judges.
Well, let's get down to business here right away. We're doing question number 2 on the Bill of Rights. I'll read it and then we'll begin. When explaining why the proposed Constitution lacked a Bill of Rights, one Federalist claimed, in a government possessed of enumerated powers, such a measure would not only be unnecessary, but preposterous and dangerous, end quote. Do you agree or disagree with Wilson? Why or why not? In your opinion, did the first 10 amendments to the Constitution sufficiently address the concerns of the Anti-Federalists? Lastly, to what extent, if any, should we consider adding additional amendments to our Constitution? You may begin.
Government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. In its worst state, an intolerable one. Common Sense by Thomas Paine, January 1776. Seeing government's evil, some founders saw a Bill of Rights essential, while others, like Federalist James Wilson, argued it would be unnecessary and dangerous. However, we disagree with Wilson's statement, as a Bill of Rights protects against selfish human nature and national overreach.
Wilson's illogical claim against a Bill of Rights mirrors those of his Federalist colleagues. James Madison argues in Federalist 55 that checks and balances make individual interests a sentinel over public rights. In Federalist 84, Alexander Hamilton adds that the Constitution already replicates British common law, where rights not included are equally secured. Wilson and other Federalists argued that a Bill of Rights is not only unnecessary, as there are checks and balances, but also dangerous, as enumerating some rights excludes others.
However, we disagree with Wilson's argument, as the Bill of Rights is essential to protect against selfish human nature. In the American Herald on October 27, 1787, John DeWitt II argues that the insatiable thirst for unconditional control over our fellow creatures would make government encroachment on individual rights inevitable. Thus, without a Bill of Rights, Congress could pass tyrannical legislation.
Additionally, while Wilson argues that adding a Bill of Rights would be preposterous and dangerous, omitting a Bill of Rights is the true danger. In the Independent Gazette on October 20th, 1787, Oldwig III highlights that the Supremacy Clause makes national laws supreme to state laws. Thus, if Congress passes legislation restricting individual rights, Bills of Rights in states provide no protection, making a national Bill of Rights essential.
Moreover, we argue that the first 10 amendments did not sufficiently address the concerns of anti-federalists worried about the inadequate protections of individual rights. Section 2 of the 1798 Sedition Acts punished any false, scandalous, and malicious writings against the United States. Though the acts intended to protect national security, they violated First Amendment rights to speech and press, showing how the Bill of Rights was not adequately enforced to satisfy anti-federalist concerns.
However, anti-federalists are not a monolith. While the Bill of Rights did not satisfy anti-federalists concerned over individual rights, it partially addressed those discontent with the structure of government, namely the protection of state powers. In the Independent Chronicle on June 11, 1788, Dennis claims that undelegated powers, if given to states, would be a Bill of Rights to the national government. The 10th Amendment, reserving powers to the states, initially satisfied anti-federalist requests for states' rights protections.
We should only consider adding amendments to the Constitution after informal changes or changes which do not alter the text of the Constitution are attempted. Before the 17th Amendment, Oregon in 1904 adopted de facto popular election of senators, requiring state legislators to nominate the candidate who won the popular vote. By the amendment's ratification in 1912, over half of the states had adopted similar changes, quickening the ratification of the amendment and showing how informal changes must occur before amendments are attempted.
However, informal changes can be harmful, and when they are, amendments are a necessary last resort. In Shelby County v. Holder, 2013, the court ruled Section 4B of the 1965 Voting Rights Act unconstitutional, destroying defenses against discriminatory voting laws targeting marginalized communities. An explicit right to vote amendment, such as House Joint Resolution 74 of 2017, would protect citizens' right to vote and help eliminate voting discrepancies.
While Federalists argued that the Constitution's flaws were just symptoms of government's necessary evil, omitting a Bill of Rights was unjustifiable. Though the addition of a Bill of Rights closed the door on one debate, it opened doors for future ones. Thank you.
Let's start out with Madison. How does he figure into this process? He originally is not in favor of amendments and then eventually leads the charge. How do you explain that flip-flop?
Well, specifically, Madison had originally supported James Wilson in his speeches in October and November regarding the addition of a Bill of Rights. However, we can see that he later supported the Bill of Rights and authored it himself, largely because of political aspects and political factors. For example, he was running against James Monroe in the election for the first for the first Congress of the new United States. And in order to satisfy his constituents and his voters within Virginia, he had to support a addition of a Bill of Rights to the Constitution in order to win that congressional election.
Additionally, Madison authored a Bill of Rights because he was fearful of a second convention. In his essay, A Tub to the Whale, Kenneth Bowling argues that in enumerating rights in the Bill of Rights instead of changes to structures of government, he wanted to satisfy anti-federalist requests without authorizing a change in government because he didn't want a new convention that would rewrite the Constitution.
Thank you.
So you talked some in your opening statement about government encroachment being the problem. What about popular encroachment? I mean, isn't the majority dangerous to the liberties of the people?
I wouldn't say that the majority is as dangerous to the rights of the people as the government would be. This was an idea that was found at the time of the founding, because even though the Americans transitioned to a more popular government, one that was no longer under a monarchy, anti-federalists still believed that the government would be the main encroachment on individual rights. This is seen in Cincinnatus 2, written on November 10th, 1787, in which they said that just because there was a new form of government, that doesn't mean that rights would be inherently protected. So I still do believe that the government would be the main encroachment on individual rights, not the majority of people.
I disagree with Sarai. There are many instances where a majoritarian belief infringes on individual rights. For example, when we look at Japanese internment, there is popular fear of Japanese citizens during World War II because of Japan's involvement. And because there was so much popular support for it, the Supreme Court ended up upholding Japanese internment, specifically Executive Order 9066 in Korematsu v. US. So we can see, even though we could see that at times majoritarian beliefs go contrary to our protections of individual liberties.
And we can also further see this point Akash brings up following the 9/11 terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, after Congress passed the Patriot Act, which surveilled individuals, infringed on individuals' right to privacy. However, there was also a lot of anti-Muslim and anti-Islam hate regarding popular support, and so we can see that majoritarian ideas within the society of the United States can often infringe on individual rights of a few.
Do you think that there are rights that maybe you don't have protected right now that you would like to see protected?
Well, one right that I believe that one amendment I believe should be added to the Constitution that would better protect people's rights is repealing the criminality clause within the 13th Amendment. This is what an idea proposed by Cedric Richmondson of Louisiana, because this would better protect the rights of incarcerated individuals, because currently under the criminality clause, people are able to be held in prison and work in almost slave-like conditions. And so I believe that this would be a better protection of the rights of people that are incarcerated if the criminality clause within the 13th Amendment were repealed.
I think another right we could better protect is the right to privacy. For example, when we look at the online domain, policies or rules such as the third-party doctrine, which say that information we give to private companies can be accessed by the government without a warrant. This seems to go against our idea of our Fourth Amendment prohibition against unreasonable searches and seizures. And I think better establishing this protection is something we need to do. Another right that I think we should add within our codified explicit declarations of rights is a specific right to healthcare. We can see the Affordable Care Act of 2010 was very necessary in order to ensure that many individuals across many states had access to healthcare and healthcare provisions. However, because of the fact that a right to healthcare is not enumerated within the Constitution, there have been debates over whether or not individuals should have that access.
Let me give you a hypothetical. It's maybe a little ridiculous, but I'm prone to that. Let's say Madison, in the process of creating the Bill of Rights, gave the first Congress a Bill of Rights that only had the 9th and the 10th Amendment. If you're a congressman, would you have voted on that? Send that out to the states. Then it's only the 9th and the 10th. What do you think?
I definitely would not have voted in favor of this. I align with many of the anti-federalists and believe that people's rights need to be enumerated. That people's rights need to be enumerated under a government because there are situations in which the government will try to interfere with this rights. This is an idea that's coined in Cato too, in which he says that it's important to entrust measures and not men, because at the end of the day, what's on paper, the rights are what will be protected, not the government. Additionally, at the time of the first Congress, a majority of House representatives in the House and senators were Federalists, and they would have opposed having a Bill of Rights altogether. For example, Noah Webster, in his speech to the first ratifying convention, argued that enumerating rights or even having a Bill of Rights was a waste of time, and that we should instead focus on policy issues. So I think even having a smaller Bill of Rights would have had a Federalist backlash as unnecessary. But I still think that having only the 9th and 10th Amendment would prove extremely difficult, first of all, to uphold individual rights within case law and within judicial rulings, but also because it just simply reiterates the ideas of the preamble and the Declaration of Independence. The whole point of the Bill of Rights is to enumerate specific rights that people are entitled to. And then that's not what's happened in the Declaration of Independence or the preamble. We refer to rights as in very general terms such as life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property. But the whole point of the Bill of Rights is to specifically outline what people are entitled to.
Do we need to make it easier to pass an amendment?
No, I don't think that we should make it easier to pass an amendment, specifically because the whole idea of having our Constitution and having the energy within our Constitution is that individuals within, specifically Americans, have a very cultural and nationalist tie to their Constitution, and the fact that the Constitution is this foundational document dating back all the way to the founding era. And so amendments are essentially, they're supposed to be adapting with the social changes over time. However, it still is supposed to be an idea that this document goes back in history and is the foundation of our democracy. And so because if we add more amendments and we make it easier to make more amendments, we essentially undermine this idea and culture. I think we need to keep the voting threshold where it is, specifically 3/4 of state legislatures or state conventions, because the Constitution is supposed to serve as a set of broad principles. It's supposed to outline principles that our government needs to abide by, such as due process, popular sovereignty, equal protection, and having the Constitution with the lower voting threshold act as almost a document of laws, such as when the 18th Amendment was passed and then quickly repealed with the 21st. It would make the Constitution harder to understand for regular citizens.
You mentioned popular sovereignty. Can you give me an example of where the Constitution actually empowers popular sovereignty? Wasn't the Constitution designed to restrict the ability of the people to control government?
I think that at the time of the founding, a lot of individuals, a lot of the founders found that popular sovereignty could only apply to certain groups, specifically white landowning men. White male property owning men. And so Because of this, a lot of the times, these rights and this idea of popular sovereignty was skewed. However, I think that through amendments such as the 17th Amendment, giving the popular election of senators to the people rather than state legislatures, our Constitution has over time slowly adapted in order to make our government more democratic and more attaining that goal of popular sovereignty.
Also say that another part of the Constitution that allows for popular sovereignty would actually be in Article 1, Section 5, which allows for Congress to make its own laws or to make its own rules concerning proceedings within the Constitution or within the chambers of the House and the Senate. And I believe that this reflects popular sovereignty because when a popularly elected body is able to create its own rules that adapt with the times, I believe that this is more reflective of how the nation can change and reflective of people's votes as they're able to vote for the people that sit in Congress, therefore making it more representative of the time period that they're in.
However, while we have this ideal of a popular elected Congress, there's still many flaws that we have in achieving popular sovereignty. For example, when we look at the incumbency advantage, about 80% of representatives and senators are re-elected every term simply because they have advantages such as pork barrel spending, in which they allocate money back to their constituents, and sending emails to their or pieces of mail to their constituents for free to advertise. May I finish my thought?
Please.
And this inherently makes this poses a flaw in our idea of popular elections.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll start out. It's fascinating to me that pork barrel spending equals popular sovereignty. I think that's just fascinating. Sorry, that's a little. That was gosh, that's a little snarky on my part. You know, this was a great conversation. Your depth of knowledge of Anti-Federalist writings, DeWitt, and others that you, I've got them all written down here. I can't see them right now on my flurry of notes. But your understanding of not just the rights agenda, but also the structural recommendations, that was very sophisticated. And your awareness of the second convention looming large in Madison's mind. I think it's interesting, your on my hypothetical about the 9th and 10th. I'm kind of sad that I can't get any takers on that proposal, but you're probably right. I'll have to concede that that's kind of ridiculous. I would say, having said that, I would say I'm not sure I would agree with you on that the Federalists would be okay with the 10th Amendment. I think the 9th Amendment clearly is a restatement of their views that they made early. So I might quibble a little bit with you on there, that would they embrace the 10th? But your understanding of the history, the background history on this is really sophisticated. So thank you. Enjoying seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next? Am I next?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The opening statement I thought was very well crafted. You crammed a whole lot of information in there. I couldn't keep up with my note keeping, and wow, there's just a whole lot there. I think that you have to be careful, though, especially in a statement that covers as much ground as yours did. You have to be very careful to make sure that the thesis comes through clearly. And I'm not sure it always came through clearly. It did mostly, but not always. So just be aware of that. Yeah, Senator, you covered a lot of ground. On the follow-ups, I think we have to be careful about a term like popular sovereignty, right? Because it doesn't mean the same thing as majority rule. And popular sovereignty was coined by Stephen Douglas for a particular purpose, and that was essentially allowing people to vote slavery in or out as they wished. And so I don't know that it's appropriate to talk about popular sovereignty in the context of the founding, because it's simply that concept was not present there. And I think we have to be careful about that. Yeah, I'll probably skip the rest of my I could go through my notes, but I thought it was a good statement. I thought you did a nice job with the follow-ups. You clearly have a lot of knowledge, and I appreciated the chance to have this conversation with you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I practice law in a general way. I represent families. I represent children. I also have a pretty hefty criminal practice, and y'all are the first folks who have said anything about repealing part of the 13th Amendment to benefit an incarcerated person. I kind of expected you to talk about a little privacy with regard to your cell phone and stuff, and you did that, but to mention someone who's incarcerated encourages me. I can assure you there are an awful lot of protections and they're given, but there are an awful lot of other things that are taken away. In fact, it has become more and more difficult in my state's legislature to want to give anybody their voting rights back, and that's only a little part of it. So I appreciated y'all addressing that. Makes me feel really, really good about the future. I don't know where you guys are going to school or what you plan to do, but you all know your stuff, and it makes me grateful. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations, a good round of applause for a job well done.